Hi, good day. Once again, we're about to start. All right, firstly, this meetup is about the Flutter, as you can see on the screen. This is actually our first Flutter meetup for the year, even though we're like going in the fourth quarter after September. So I am Oshin Bailey, the co-founder of Jamaican Developers Group. To give you a bit about Jamaican Developers, the group that arranged this event, we are a community of tech enthusiasts in Jamaica that aims to grow and market development skills of Jamaican with a community of highly proficient technical officers and companies. So far, we have 300 members across different platform, Meetup, the Docker event, and also Jamaican Developers website and our Discourse forum. In addition, we've done over 20 training since last year, February, and we are aiming to train more and more developers, above like 100 developers in the coming months. Objective of all of training meetings is to strengthen the development skills of Jamaicans, which is geared towards building and marketing these developers. Jamaica has quite a lot of quality and very skilled developers, but at times it's the exposure and the opportunities that basically is not given to these developers for them to earn more, to develop and create great products, especially locally and overseas. So one of the things that we are doing as a group, we are creating a centralized hub for anything related to tech in Jamaica, whether it's news, jobs, events, training, projects, everything related to tech will be hosted and promoted on Jamaican developers website, so that it's a form of export to the world, and more companies, whether overseas or individuals overseas, can see the type of project we are working on and the quality developers that we have right here in Jamaica. And of course, as developers, we may do a lot of Google search in for like bugs or some research and development to improve the way we work or improve our quality of our software. And at times we might go to Stack Overflow, Medium articles, or some other online resource for these type of tech blogs and solutions. So what we are gearing towards is to create our community platform apart from the centralized hub. That community platform is like a discussion panel. We're using Slack and a Discourse forum to basically create that discussion and chat with developers locally in Jamaica and of course Jamaican diaspora. It means that a developer, even though you may want a particular solution or help with, finding a fix for a bug or something of the sort, you can simply connect with someone nearby within Kingston, Spanish Town, and that person can just give that individual assistance as well as reach out to us, and we'll find some means of helping these developers. So today agenda will basically touch on Flutter. We're going to talk about what Flutter is, why use Flutter, have a quick versus comparison between Flutter and React, especially for mobile development, and going into a demo. So, so, um, so firstly, we have a guest speaker, and I'll shortly introduce that guest speaker. After the presentation will go into a discussion panel where we can talk about Flutter, and then anyone that been working on a Flutter application, you can basically do a 1 to 2 minutes quick talk about your experience with Flutter. And there's also a poll that I will publish that you can answer to get an idea and feel about how many of us are actively using Flutter in our everyday development life. Afterwards, we'll wrap up the meeting. And so our guest speaker is Curtis Covington. He is from America at a company called iSales CRM. He's a senior software developer, and he's going to introduce Flutter, how we use it, and show us a quick demo of, well, not necessarily a quick demo. He's going to walk us through to what some of the application is built and some of the Flutter code. So with that said, Curtis, I'm going to grant you permission to share the screen.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Introducing Flutter. I am Curtis Covington. I am a senior software engineer at Kovac Systems. Our main product is a sales software called iSales CRM. It basically allows sales agents to connect to their leads to make sales for them. So what is Flutter? Version 1.0 came out in 2018. It was backed by Google. Flutter is able to make web apps. It's able to compile to native iOS apps. It's able to compile to native Android apps, all with one code base. There's also in the works the ability to compile to native desktop apps as well, but that's in alpha stages right now. You can get everything you need for Flutter at flutter.dev. So my experience with Flutter, Kovac Systems, the company I work for, needed a mobile app. And the CEO was very skeptical of Flutter when I pitched it to him. He's very used to React. So within one day, I was able to build a complete working prototype of everything we needed for our app. And the CEO was instantly sold on going all in on Flutter. And now, after a month of development, our app is being released within the next couple of days. So the difference between Angular and React and Flutter. So Angular and React, they have an HTML structure. They're component-based. They've got a somewhat complicated UI. They're slow to compile. Flutter compiles much faster. Flutter apps are slightly larger though, but the trade-off is in the compile time. Flutter uses Dart compared to JavaScript and TypeScript. Dart is more like Java. It's more like C++. It's a compiled language. So there's a native look and feel when you compile in Flutter. And in React and Angular, you can kind of mimic the look and feel of native iOS and Android apps, but it's never quite right. Flutter, it's perfect. And there is no JavaScript layer in Flutter. It's completely native. Any questions so far? Okay.
Quick question. How long have you been working with Flutter?
I've been working on it since beta, on and off. I haven't been full-time Flutter engineer. So I've been working on it since probably early 2018.
Yeah.
So a couple years now.
Well, that's a good amount of time in Flutter development because it's relatively new. So yes. It hasn't been around for a long time. So that's good.
Yes. All right, so to get started with Flutter, all you need to do is download and install Flutter and all the required SDKs, such as the Android SDKs or iOS SDKs and Xcode if you're on Mac. And then you run Flutter create my app and replace my app with whatever app name you want, and it will generate the boilerplate code for you. Then you open that folder that it generates in VS Code, and you install Flutter VS Code extensions, which is very easy. I'll show you that in a second. And a note here, iOS requires an Apple device, so you can't compile an iOS application without a MacBook. But you can still work on the code in Windows, and then later on take that same code and compile it on a Mac to create your iOS app. No real changes will be required.
Okay. Hold on, Curtis. So two things. If you have any questions, you can leave it in the comment and I'll ask, or raise it and I grant you permission to speak. Secondly, for MacBook is pretty expensive. And there might be a lot of Windows developers or developers using the Windows machine or Linux. In cases like where they are a developer without a Mac OS, is there any cloud service that you know of that can compile iOS application?
Not that I'm aware of, but the same code that you can create on Linux or Windows, you can get anyone with a MacBook, any developer with a MacBook, and they can take that same code and compile it to iOS. I don't know of any services though.
Okay, all right. I guess I'm a Windows person, so I guess I probably have to just borrow a friend computer and then compile it and get back. But
yes.
Continue.
All right, so Flutter has a bunch of widgets in it. It's widget based, unlike React and Angular, which is more component based. And this is a list of widgets that are commonly used and what we'll be commonly using in the demo. Containers, they're just the generic, sort of like an HTML div. So they can be styled however we want. We'll be using them a lot. Columns and rows, they're basically like table columns and rows in HTML. Then we have grid views and list views. A list view is just a scrolling list. A grid view can also be scrolling, but you can specify it to have or to be more grid-like. And then there's icon widgets, which can take generic icons. Flutter comes with material icons, so you can use all the material icons in that, or you can add your own. And then there's two widgets, stacked or stack and positioned. And they are used to make more interesting UIs, which we will see shortly in the demo. So this is what we are going to be creating in the demo. It's pretty much exactly what I created my first day working on the mobile app. So this is just a real world example. It's just, this will be in the iSales CRM app when it releases in a few days. So it's just a simple screen. It's the dashboard screen of the app. We have a grid view here. You can see it's like a grid, and it's showing some important numbers that our users, that our salespeople would like to know. How many new leads they got that day, how many texts they got, outgoing calls, inbound calls, just basic numbers there. And then under that is their appointments. So they could have a list of appointments that they could scroll through. And then over here, you see these three squares. Those are sort of like icon buttons, and they'll be able to switch through different types of appointments. So you have generic appointments, and then clicking on the next one, they'd have like follow-up appointments and then call appointments. And that would change what the list view here is displaying. So if you have any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer. Otherwise, we can get right into the live code demo. All right. So I will switch over here and I will run the Flutter create, and we'll call it whatever we want. We'll call it now dashboard prototype. And then it will generate dashboard prototype. And once that's completely finished, we can open it up in VS Code. And to do that, let me just do this. Here There we go. All right, to install the Flutter extension, by the way, you can just go into the extensions, type Flutter, and then just click here, and it will be install here instead of disable. And it's very helpful to have. So we can get right into the code. It'll generate all of this for you. We'll be ignoring most of that for now. So let's just run and see what it gets. So the first time you run in VS Code, it takes a little bit to boot up and come into the simulator. So while that's happening, I'll show you a bit here. So we have the My App stateless widget. Like I said, everything in Flutter is a widget. And then Material App, because we're creating a material application, and we can give it whatever name we want of the application. So we'll just call this Dashboard Prototype. And it's come up here. So now here we see primary swatch. That's the materials theme. And it will show up wherever like certain buttons are, like this here. So we can change this to red if we want. And then as soon as I save with the Flutter extension, it should automatically update, as you see. So that makes coding this makes prototyping very fast. Let's change that back to blue for now. And let's create a background color. Let's do that. We just go colors, and then let's make it a gray. It's a bit too gray, so with material, we can just change the shade of gray that we want to use. So 300, 200. There we go. So we're going to ignore all of this here, and we're going to create our own thing. So it's created a My Home page for us, which this property home is using. So we're going to create our own widget here to use. So we'll do that by typing dashboard page. And then the Flutter extension also has some shortcuts. So we can do ST, and then we can see stateful and stateless widgets. I'll explain the difference between those in a second. But for now, we want a stateful widget, and that'll generate some code for us. And we type in the name of our widget. And then there's an error here, but that's just because we haven't imported the package material. So we just click the little light bulb and then import. And there we go. And now I will come over here, replace this with dashboard page, and then it will instantly load. Right now it's just blank. There's a container here. I mentioned that it's just like a div. So we can give the div a color. Colors.red. Or we could use materials theming. And we do that by doing theme.of. And then primary color. And that's our blue. But right now we really want something more app-like. So we can use a scaffold, which is what all apps really use, every single page in the app. So scaffold, and the scaffold takes an app bar. An app bar is just another widget built into the Flutter library. And it can have a title, and we use a text widget to give it a title. We'll call it dashboard. There we go. Now it's looking more like a normal app. The scaffold also takes a body, and we can do a container body. And again, just to show that it's working, we can set the color of the container. Let's just set it to black. So you can see that we've got the app bar in the body. Typically, bodies for a scaffold, you want to be able to scroll. So we can do that by creating a list view. We replace that with list view. And then list view has a property called children, and that's the children of the list view. We can just throw in a few children here. As you see, it also formats the code. So now we can scroll this, and if there was more, it would like scroll properly. All right, but what we really want is a grid view for this top section here. So let's add in a grid view inside this list view. And we are going to do a grid view.count, and we're going to do 2 because we want two accesses. And then just like the list view, we can do children. And then we want numbers in those, since we have 4. What happened here? Let's just reload. Sometimes Flutter messes up a little bit, and you can just the hot load reload messes up. Bad state. That's just, oh, that's, so in a grid view, or if you nest list views or anything that could potentially scroll, you need to shrink wrap them. And that just lets Flutter like calculate the sizes properly. So there we go. Now we have 4 numbers here, and we kind of want real numbers. So let's create some real variables here. Int leads, int text, int out calls, and int in calls. And then we can initialize the state by overriding the init state method. The init state requires us to call the super init state. Then we can just do this dot leads equals 1, this dot text equals 2, this dot out calls equals 3, and in calls equals 4. And in here, this is where you connect to an API or make a HTTP request or something like that to get the data. But right now, we're just doing a quick prototype. So then we can display them here. Out calls and in calls. So because this is the initialized state, it hasn't ran because of the hot reload. So we can just force the refresh. And now it's there. So typically in these types of apps, you'd want those numbers to refresh when you like pull down. So we can do that by just wrapping this list view here, coming over to this, wrap with widget, with a refresh indicator. And that has a property called onRefresh, which is just a method. And now we can do something like this. There we go. So now you can see that. I also forgot to mention, so this grid view will also try to scroll, but it's nested in a list view, so we don't want that to happen. So we'll just add a never scroll physics to it. And now we can do that. So let's just generate random numbers here for when we refresh, just to show that it's working. But like I said, this is where you would hit the API and get new data. In a stateful widget, which this is, we have to call setState to change the state of our widget, and that just tells Flutter that it needs to refresh the components that have these variables. This dot leads equals random. You probably need to import math. Yep. Random.secure.nextInt. and then we'll just do 10. So now that's updating. We can just do that with the rest of them. And end calls. Now when I do this, they'll all update. Perfect. All right, so we've got a grid here, but it looks horrible. So let's try to make that look a lot better. We'll do that by creating our own custom widget. So we'll come over here and create a widgets folder. And we'll create a widget called a dashboard tile because these are kind of like tiles. And now we can make a stateless widget because there's no state involved, so we don't need set state or anything like that. It's just it's a display only widget. And we import material again. There we go. So the dashboard tile is going to need to take in a number to display. So we'll declare any variables in a stateless widget as final to indicate that they can't be changed. And we will set our constructor to take in a number and call super on it. And then we can just replace text with a number. So when I change this over here to dashboard tile, nothing will really change in the UI, but we will be using our component now. And then we can make updates to that slowly. So we set the number property to leads, and then we can do the same with the rest of them. Texts, out calls, and end calls. There we go. So like I said, it looks exactly the same. We're just now nested it in a common widget. And now we can make more interesting things happen. So let's wrap this in a container and set the color of the container to red. So now they are all red, but we kind of probably want them to each be their own color. So we can create another property called color and just pass it in. And we can set it here and then set it in here. So now that one's red, and then we can make these whatever colors we want. And then as you see, it updates very fast. It's just the hot reload is wonderful to use. Orange and let's say purple. Perfect. Now we probably want them to be spaced out a little bit from each other. So let's just give them a margin. And to do that, we do margin and then edge insets. And we'll say we want all of the, like every margin, so top, left, bottom, and right, to be, let's say, 10. Let's try 20. All right, that's a little better. All right, so we also want them to have a sort of title. So let's do that by taking this child, clicking text, and then clicking this light bulb and wrap with a column. So that way we can stack these things on top of each other. Text, title. There we go. And for that, we can come up here and add in another property. And again, just the same system, title, and then give each one of these their own title. Oops. So this is in calls, inbound calls, title, this is text, this is outbound calls, and this one is leads. Okay, that's good. Let's get them centered now. We do that with main axis alignment on the column. And we'll pass in this, and we'll do space evenly. And this will also probably look good with an icon in between them. So we can do icons.ac unit for now, just as an example. Okay. So we also probably want each of these to have their own icon. So another property, just icon data icon, and we pass it in the constructor. And then utilize it here. Also, we can set a default value, just like this, just for example. And then we come over here and set it. Icons.people. So these are all the material icons, by the way, so they come included with Flutter. Icon.sms. Icons.phone. And let's do that one. Okay, great. Now, these would probably look better with white coloring here for the text. So to do that, we can just pass in a style to our text widget, a text style with a color and colors.white. Perfect. We can copy that over to the other. And the icon widget can also be, or can also have a color property. We can also make the size a little better or bigger. Let's try 30. There we go. So that's looking a little bit better, but it'd probably look even more better with rounded borders. So to do that, we go to our container and give it a decoration, a box decoration to be exact.
Funny, I was just about to ask you, can you make the edges rounded? But
Let's say that again.
No, I'm saying, funny, I was just about to ask if you can make the box rounded edges, but you're doing great. Continue.
Yes. So that's what we're about to do. When we have a decoration, we can't have a color here. So we'll just take that away and we'll put the color inside the box decoration. And then we give the box decoration a border radius. Border radius, a circular one, and then we pass in the radius. Let's try 20. All right, and that looks a bit better. And you see we can play with these numbers to make them however we want, and they instantly update. So that looks a lot better. But there's one thing else we could do to make this even better. And let's make these not solid colors, but instead a gradient. So we do that by taking the same box decoration and passing the gradient property. We'll pass it a linear gradient. And that just takes a list of colors. And since we already have a material color here, and material color has different shades for each color, we can utilize that. So we can go color.shade 100 and color.shade 300, for example. That's a bit too much, so let's up it to 400 and 600. All right, that's looking a lot better. So at this point, I think this looks pretty good. Do you have any questions so far? All right, so we've got this first section pretty much down. And now it's time to move on to the bottom section. The bottom section is just another container, it looks like. It's got these icons here that will change the tabs. So they're kind of like tabs. And this icon like box will dart up a little bit above the card itself. So it's kind of like floating above it. So a little bit more complicated. So let's get to that. So here under the grid view, we can create a card. And the card will have a child. Let's just have it as a text for now. Let's call it appointments. And there it is. So really, we want a column here because we want the appointments and then another list, a list of the actual appointments for them. So let's wrap this with a column. And then we can have another list view. And we can give it 2 children for now. And the children will be list tiles. So list tile is commonly used with list views in Flutter. And title, and then we'll just say John Smith. Oh, yep. So again, because this is a nested list view, we need to shrink wrap it. And we also need to never scroll physics. Just like that. So with each appointment kind of has a name and a date. So let's create our own model for that. So we'll go in here and create a new folder called models. And we'll just call it appointment. Appointment.dart, sorry. And then we can create our own Dart class called appointment. And like I said, it has a name and it has a date time. We'll just call it date. Then we create our constructor, this.name and this.date. We probably also want to format this date, so we'll just throw in a class method here that returns a string called format date. And so in Flutter, we can just use an arrow function here to just automatically return. We can do that. And date dot month slash. So we're just creating our own formatter function here. Day and year. And then the hour and the minute, or the hour and minutes. Day.hour and minutes. There we go. So over in our dashboard page, we can create another variable here, a list of appointments. We'll call it appointments and set it to an empty list. And then we can use something very easy to create a bunch of appointments for us just for prototype data. So we can do list.generate, and we can say 10, and we're just going to generate a bunch of appointments, or 10 appointments to be exact. We're just going to name them all John Smith. And set the date to datetime.now. And then we will set appointments to that. Now over here, we can't really use those appointments yet. So instead of using the normal list view, we'll use listview.builder. And instead of a children array, it'll take in a item builder function. And that has a build context and an index. And it returns a widget. And the widget will be a list tile. List tile will have a title that is a row. The row has children, and then we'll have the first child be the name of the appointment. So we'll do appointments subindex dot name, and then the date. Subindex dot format date. So we need to add an item count here, and that's just appointments dot length, and that's hard refresh. Where did I mess up here? Okay. Let's check to see if appointments is not null. So here I'm just saying if appointments is null, then just show an empty container. Well, that's not working either. It's hard to refresh again. Let's just stop and restart it. This is the joys of live coding.
Yes, I'm actually looking if there's any error, and I can't spot anything as well.
Yeah, sometimes that just happens. So the list view builder takes an item count, and that's how it runs the items builder. And it passes, like, as you get through each index, the index here. And that's how we get appointments index. Here we go. So yeah, there was just a state error there. Sometimes that happens in Flutter, and you have to just restart. And that's basically because I was adding variables here, and it wasn't really updating state properly because of the hot reload feature. So now we should be able to take away this, because it should never be null.
All right, before you continue, all right, so as a new, yeah, sorry about that. So as like for new developers, are developers who are familiar with even software development, because the Dart is similar to Java with a JSON type of syntax.
Yes.
Well, JavaScript type of syntax. All right, so like for debugging, I personally know that Flutter comes with quite a lot of debugging tool, but
Yes.
at the same time, similar to JavaScript, sometimes the error message does not make any sense. The error message we just saw wasn't really helpful. So what's the likeliness stuff like that will occur, and for new developers, what would you recommend when it comes on to understanding what to do next, how to resolve these errors, and what to look for?
The first thing I would do, if everything looks right in your code and things were working and you added a variable like I did here. So I did
Yeah.
this, and hot reload doesn't really like change the, doesn't reinitialize the classes here. So I would recommend just doing a hard refresh, stopping the app and then running it again. That way it'll like refresh the class variables and it'll run the init state again. Everything should be fine. You could also click this button here. It'll open the DevTools widget inspector page. That can give you a bit more insight into what's going on. But what I do most of the time is use print statements. So I can do print here in the on refresh call, and then we can print whatever we want. We can print out variables and try to see what data is showing. So now that that's there, it'll show. So just print hello world, whatever variables you want. I use a lot of print statements in my debugging.
Okay. Is it possible for you to? I know that this is a bit of a sidetrack, but is it possible for you to just show the debug tool for those who are
Sure.
new to?
So it's opening now, or at least it should be. It might open in the browser. Here it is. So this is Flutter's debug tools. There's a lot here, way too much to really go over. So that's showing that we're running in debug mode, but we can see a timeline of everything for performance. You can see memory usage. We can get into the debugger here. I believe we can also do breakpoints. I have not really messed with breakpoints much.
Yeah, I think it's click on the line and then step through like any normal okay, I guess.
Yep, there we
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah.
let's get it in the refresh. That's the wrong one. That's main.dart. Where is it?
Libraries. This is the second one. Is it the second? Yeah.
Yep, there we go. So here we can go in here and just add a breakpoint there. And should, if we run it, there we go. Oh, so it should also show up in VS Code as well.
Oh,
And then
okay.
step through.
All right.
All right, so I'm gonna, any more questions on that or anything else you wanted to see?
No. Anyone has any question?
All right, so yeah, here you can see the entire widget tree and see everything that's made up of the widget. So you can like be sure that your logic is sound and like everything is where it's supposed to be. And it's also very useful for debugging performance issues and trying to get those perfect. Flutter is very good on performance as is. Okay.
All right. I don't see any questions from the chat nor the live stream. You can continue.
Okay. So we want to make these not as close together. We want them to be spaced out. So like we've done before in other places, we can do main axis alignment and then space between. and now they're spaced out like they should be. We could also edit our date format function to like change this to a 12-hour format with AM, PM if we wanted. There's all sorts of things we could do with that. All right, so now we've got this column here, but we wanted, if I can get back here, we wanted the 3 icons here and this icon here. So let's go and do that. So those icons will be like next to this appointment. So that will be another row that we're using. So again, we click on that widget and we wrap with row. And then it will be yet another row of widgets here. So we'll say row and then children. And then we'll use icon button. It's just a button that has an icon. Oh, so this is icon data. We need an actual icon widget that takes in icon data. There we go. And we want 3 of those because there are 3 different types of appointments in this particular application. So we can just do maybe people and call. There we go. And we can space these out by, again, doing main axis alignment. And then space between. There we go. Now we probably want some margins around this card. So we can just wrap this with maybe a padding here. There we go. And we want the appointments to be a little closer so we have room for this icon here. So we're going to add some padding to this here. But instead of all edge insets all, we're just going to do the left side. So edge insets only and then left. We'll probably bring that over 20. No, let's try 60. That's a bit better. We'll see how it looks with the other icon. So we'll do that by wrapping this card with a stack. So we'll wrap with widget, and we'll use our stack because we kind of want to stack this thing on top of it and then move it up a little bit. So we'll do stack, and that takes a fun tip that I have. Like things like stack takes children and not child. So I tend to wrap with column that like auto generates the children and then change it to stack. And then inside the stack, we can go to the end of this card here and add a positioned element. And we can do just a container that has a icon and that calendar. And we can probably set this width and height to 50. There we go. So let's move that up a bit by setting top to -10. Let's give it a color to make it more apparent. Green. Let's make this colors.white. So as you notice, this is kind of like cutting off here, and that is because there's a clip behavior on this stack. So there's a property called clip behavior, and we can just do clip.none. There we go. And now we can move it over to the left a little bit. There you go, perfect. We could also do the same thing by rounding the edges. And again, that was super simple. Just decoration, box decoration, border, decoration. Oh, what'd I do? I think I added that, yeah. So decoration, box decoration, color, colors.green, because again, we can't have a box decoration with a color. We have to add the color inside the box decoration. And then border radius dot circular, and then let's try 20. It's a bit too much, so let's go 10. That's better. And now we just need to make this tab switch. So we need to like make these buttons work and make these tabs switch. So the first thing we can do is create more lists of appointments. So one list for follow-ups. So that's kind of like our sales agents scheduling a follow-up for whatever sales contract they're doing. And then the next one for calls. So it's like them scheduling a call. So we have that. We're just going to leave them blank. Or actually, we can just copy this and leave one blank. Follow up. Perfect. So we want to be able to differentiate and set a state when we click these buttons to know what tab we're on. So in order to do that, we'll just create a quick enum. And that's, we'll just call it tab or appointment tab. And we'll say just generic for first, because it's just a generic appointment. And then follow up and call. And then in here, we can have a appointment tab. And we'll call it current tab. And in the set state, we can just set it to generic. And then down here in the in here, we want to in these icon buttons, we want to create a function. So just an anonymous function. And we want to set the state in each of them to set the tab state in their current tab. Current tab equals, and then so generic for the first one, and then follow up for the second, and call for the third. Now we can say in here, we can set the color. Let's do it for all of them at once. We can set the color to like the app themes color when they are active. So it kind of gives a more of a visual indication of what tab you're currently on. So in order to do that, we do color, and then we do a sort of if statement here, a tyranny statement. Current tab equals generic, and then theme dot of context dot accent color or colors dot black. There we go. Missing a parentheses. I believe, yes.
I think one, okay.
Yep. So let's just hard refresh since we added some data there. They are all set to generic right now, so let's just change that to call and change this one to follow-up. So now we can click on the tabs and change them, sort of. Nothing's changing down here yet. Let's first change this title. So I'm going to do that by just extracting this to a method. So I'll go into this little light bulb here and extract method. And we'll call it build tab title. Then down here, we can change this from an arrow function to a normal function. And switch on the current tab. Case appointment tab generic. We return this text. Case appointment tab follow-up. We return the text follow-up. And case appointment tab call. Let's return the text call. And there we have that. We could also change this icon if we wanted. Now we just need to change the list that we're on. So we do that in pretty much the same way that we just did the appointments. We take this list view dot builder. We come over to the light bulb and extract method. Let's call it build tab or build tab. Let's make sure that this is returning a widget because we want to show a text. We want to return a text widget if there is no data to display. So we do the same thing. So I'm just going to copy this switch. And for appointments, we just do that, no changes needed. For this one, we would use the follow-ups. So instead of appointments here, we do follow-up. And same thing for the calls. Instead of appointments, we do calls. And then the last thing we need here is to check to see if calls even has anything, because if we go over here, it's just nothing here, and that doesn't really look good. And let's refresh the data to make sure that we get everything we need. Let's change this to 2 and change this to Jane Doe, so we see the difference. There we go. So Jane Doe, so that's on the follow-up. That's on the appointments. Follow-up. And then for calls, because calls has nothing in it, we want to make sure that we account for that state. So we just do calls.length is greater than 0, or this call. So if it's greater than 0, then we can return the list view as normal. But if it's not, we just want to return a text that says no calls today. There we go. And we can do the same thing for the others. So follow up, dot length is greater than 0. We do that. Otherwise, we do no follow-ups today. And finally, the generic appointments. So appointments.length is greater than 0. And then a text, no appointments today. And there we have it. And that is our completed dashboard page prototype. Does anyone have any questions on this or anything that you'd like me to go over? All right. In conclusion, I love Flutter and I hope you will too. I hope this was informative. I'd like to thank Brian Zalk for being my mentor and helping me get to where I'm at. So thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer whatever you guys have.
Okay, so I don't see any question coming in. All right, so I have some questions. All right, so when you come on to learning materials, of course, there's Flutter.dev. But for new developers, especially for someone just getting into programming, because some of the stuff that I wanted to touch on while you demo, but I'm like, if I say something, it will lead into a bunch of other questions and answers, especially from someone who definitely just started programming. For example, OOP, the final state, final mean constant, and so forth. So when come on to like all of these base concept that developers should know, apart from Flutter.dev, what would you recommend developers to read, or where would they go to learn new trades and the concept of software development, especially mobile development and Flutter?
I would say YouTube is an invaluable resource. I still use YouTube to this day, and I've been a software engineer for 10 years now. So
Okay.
YouTube, you can find so much information on Flutter, on programming in general, everything. It's an invaluable resource.
Okay. Well, that's a definitely yes, and I think most of us basically utilize YouTube as well. When come on to any form of courses or because you can watch a YouTube video, but it doesn't really capture everything. Same for documentation, because at times there are minor details and tricks and trade and best practice that these things don't capture. So I know that there are people who actually learn through reading. So is there any books or particular recommended course, even on Udemy or so forth, or in YouTube as YouTube series? Do you have any of those that would you recommend?
For Flutter specifically, there's the pub.dev, that's their Flutter packages. But you can also click into their GitHub issues and ask questions on there. I've used Stack Overflow. I can't really recommend any courses because I've never taken any. So
Okay.
I don't know about that.
It's same for me, but at times I get the question, which course would you recommend? And I'm like, yeah. But apart from that, based on your experience of working with Flutter for the last 2 years, or almost 2 years, when you come on to database, of course, there's Firebase, which is a NoSQL database, and there's MongoDB, and that's another NoSQL database. SQLite, which is for local database, which is pretty lightweight. Um, Based on where I'm getting is what are the pros and cons of using these various different type of database and your experience with it, especially when it come on to for a new developer, which one would you recommend them to start with? I'm assuming it's for Firebase, but like
Yes.
the like tips and best practice when it come on to handling database API and working with integrations.
So I definitely recommend Firebase. I absolutely love Firebase. I use it for all my personal projects. So
Okay.
Firebase is just very easy. A brand new developer can get up and running with it and uh, build a real application using Firebase very easily. So I definitely recommend that. If you want to get into more serious development and like connecting to an actual SQL database, the best place to start there would be SQLite, because then you can start playing with a local database on your own and very low maintenance, easy to kind of understand. It's just pretty much a text file on your computer at that point. So, and then you can transition that to like a more traditional SQL database as you develop your knowledge. But definitely, I'd recommend for beginners and uh, professionals alike, Firebase is incredible.
Okay. Um, I have a follow-up question, but I before I go into it, Glenford, you have your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute. Oh,
Yeah, hi Curtis. My question: Have you had have you found that you had to move away from the master branch of Flutter? I mean, from the beta to the master branch for any performance increases?
So beta was a long time ago. There was a lot of bugs and stuff in beta, but it was still amazing. But once the initial release launched in 1.0 back in 2018, it was a significant improvement, and I did switch immediately over to that. But it was a painless switch. Right now, I believe they just released Flutter 1.2, 1.20. So, but that's also a seamless thing. You just type Flutter upgrade, and it upgrades for you now.
Yeah, so have you experimented with the current alpha release of the desktop
I have not.
branch? Oh, okay, that's all.
all right. Thank you, Glenford. Gardo, you can unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, oh, okay. I two questions. I have two questions. Um, my first question is, what is the limit in Flutter development? Uh, and the second is what is your recommendation about backend when I using the Flutter in front end? Thank you so much.
Okay, so your first question was what are the limits of Flutter, and they're actually surprisingly minimal. So in my experience with this past app that I've been building over the past month, we had to connect to Twilio's texting API to be able to send and receive text messages, but that requires a platform independent code, and there was no like libraries that were already written. So I had to go in and create my own Flutter plugin to connect to those APIs. So that can be a bit daunting at first, especially for a new developer. So if you ever run into like platform specific things that you need to do, that could be a limitation for you. But if you have the will to go in and create your own plugin, you can go into the native Swift code or the native Java or Kotlin code for Android and create your own plugin and utilize it in Flutter. So, and if I got your second question right, it's what backend would I recommend? I definitely Firebase for prototypes or for quick projects. If you need to get something up and running quick, Firebase is incredibly easy, very intuitive. It's got good support in Flutter. I actually use Firebase for our notifications in the application that we're releasing soon. So Firebase 100%.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'm going to publish a poll about Flutter. While I'm asking another question, you can go ahead, attendees, to just answer the short survey. Curtis, the follow-up question that I had is, I'm assuming you have experience working with other database tools. For example, Firebase, MongoDB. What are some of the difference you noticed with like the two major NoSQL databases, and also utilization of SQL database, like SQLite?
Okay, so if you need a very performant database, there's no replacement for like a SQL database. You can index columns and get your you can transaction queries to make more efficient queries and get the data you need faster. But you have the limitation of scaling vertically. So that means you can just add more CPU, RAM, memory to your database. But that's it. Where NoSQL, you can kind of, you have unstructured data, which means read-write access isn't as fast. But you also have the ability to have unstructured data. You can scale it horizontally, meaning you can just add another instance of the server and it'll just work in a NoSQL database. It all depends on the use case or the application. One example I can think of in my current position is I am building out a microservice architecture, and some of our services are using a SQL database for when we need to have highly secured and robust queries. And then some of my other services are just using a NoSQL database when I just need to store data somewhere that doesn't matter, like how fast it's queried or something like that. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes. Another thing that well, these are some questions I've gotten in the past. Since you're here, I'm making use of the session. So another question, of course, is Flutter is aiming to be one place rephrase, a place that you can just write one single source code and it get compiled and able to deploy on different platforms. Based on what you said earlier, I believe you done it for iOS, Android, basically the mobile platform. But when come on to web and desktop, I know that it's definitely not stable as yet. But from your experience, what are the common problems you've noticed when come on to building an application for web and desktop through Flutter, or is it that you haven't gone towards desktop and web development for Flutter as yet?
So I've never really used desktop and web development for Flutter. I tend to be against sharing code bases. I know that's one of the biggest draws to Flutter and also to like React Native or React in general, or even Angular, being able to share code bases. And I found a lot of times, while that's useful, when it comes to projects at scale, it's not really ideal. It's more for getting things up and running quickly and like getting a minimum viable product out. But in like a production environment, I wouldn't really recommend using one code base. I'd recommend using the best tool for the job. And
Noted.
that depends on what exactly you're doing.
Okay. And for mobile development, are there any common problems that like tend to be a recurring issue? Apart from the bug that we saw earlier, well, not necessarily bug, the issue where you had to force restart due to the change of class variable or property.
So I'd say the most common issue that I've experienced is finding something that required platform that required like a plugin that talked to the actual platform, like whether it be iOS or Android. So that can be detrimental for a new developer. But if you know what you're doing, you can go in and like build what you need to build with that. It's not really something that a new developer could do. They could learn. So that's definitely an issue. There are plugins available that's already built by people. I believe there's a very good website. It starts publishing platform pub.dev, I believe. And there's a ton of Flutter plugins there that already do a bunch of things that are commonly needed. But if you run into an issue that like hasn't been ran into by someone else, or someone else hasn't really worked on it, then that can be an issue.
All right. Thank you. Anyone has any more questions? Let me check the chat. Guess that's
Yeah, I have a question. As it relates to testing, Curtis, does Flutter provides internal tools for testing, or do you use like a library or such that's external?
Yes, there are internal tools. So that's, I believe, built into the Dart language. And I think the Flutter library also has some tools. I didn't go over it in our demo just for sake of time. But yes, there are tools built into Dart.
Okay.
And I might even be able to show you some here. So test. So this is their example that generates with the Flutter create command. So this is just using the standard library. And you can create as whatever test you want.
Okay, so it seems straightforward, similar to writing a Java test or even a Python test or even JavaScript with await. So I don't think the learning curve. So one thing I like definitely is that it does not seem like there's a lot of learning curve for a new developer, not for testing nor for learning certain development tools. Like you said, it's like building out custom component or API integration may be the issue. When it comes on to accessibility to native features and service of a phone. For example, to utilize like the phone app or the different app on the system and like geo sensor or NFC, what how easy is it, like on a scale of 1 to 5, to get that integration or call mobile services using Flutter?
If you already know how to do native Android and iOS development and you understand those APIs, then it's super easy because then you just create a Flutter plugin and write the native code and then utilize that Flutter plugin in your project. I think the hardest learning curve is if you don't know those native APIs and how to access them, or like how to write Java code for Android or something like that, then that's where it gets more difficult. But if you know that already, then it's super simple. I'd say five being the easiest. And if you don't know those things, then that's where the learning curve comes in.
Okay. All right. All right. We're going to move on to another section, lightning talk. That's if anyone else don't have any more questions. Not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, so the next session is lightning talk. Thank you very much, Curtis. I'm pretty sure we've learned a lot, and I'm going to publish the video on YouTube, if that's okay with you. Otherwise, from it, I shared it with a group of newbies in Flutter and software development overall. So so far, some said they like the approach that you took. It was really interactive, and they got to see how it would build out a nice UI. All right. So so thank you very much once again for accepting the invite. I hope I can get you on this meeting sometime in the future again. And I'll definitely try to keep in contact with you through Brian or whichever means.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you guys have learned a lot. I hope you guys love Flutter. And I hope you guys make some amazing applications.
All right. All right. Let me share my screen. All right. So if anyone has like a Flutter app they're working on, or any project that they're thinking about doing utilizing Flutter, or whether they're using Flutter, you can raise it, and I'll give the speaker the mic to you so you can just talk about your experience with Flutter. I'm going to actually pick on someone, Glenford.
I never really expected a lightning talk session, so I didn't prepare anything. But, I've played around on the Flutter for a while, on and off. I've only done one serious project, a mobile app for a local company. But so far, I really love Flutter. I have actually been playing with mostly on the desktop because, in my experience, I get to move a lot faster than when I'm saying targeting for say Android or iOS, or physical device are using an emulator. Of course, there are some hiccups here and there because a lot of libraries use native Android or iOS features, but because of the state of Flutter for desktop, those plugins will not work with desktop. So at times you might find that you need to use either not using those libraries or trying to implement something that that plays nicely with Flutter plugins use platform channels. So as long as you implement the platform channels interface for whatever platform you're working on, it works out great. But my most recent adventure with Flutter would be playing around with data tables. I found that let me see if I can pull it up quick. I've been trying to not repeat myself when creating data tables, and I ended up trying to I ended up modifying, creating a custom widget that actually helped me a whole lot. It's it it's it uses that notation to assign values to widgets. Let me pull it up real quick, and show you what I'm talking.
Right. Colin, I noticed that you added an up. So after Glenford, you can go next.
Desktop. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
All right. Glenford, while you pull it up, Colin, do you have something to say? You can go ahead and talk while Glenford pull up his Flutter app.
Okay. So my experience with Flutter, well, I've so far only worked on one project in Flutter with Flutter, because my thing is mostly web. But before Flutter, I used to, use either Cordova to work on a project or use Android, and Flutter was nice, but it was like a shock at the same time, because with Android, I was used to the drag and drop, right? Then you work with the views in the controller, and Cordova was straightforward. But it was a shock because everything was declarative, and the whole state management. But I worked on an app. It's a real simple app, but what I learned from it, I had some good takeaways from it. That's with state management and the way how data is handled in Flutter. So there are things called streams and futures, right? And I built an app that makes calls to an HTTP to restore HTTP arrest server. It's the server offers an API which you can get advice, right? So I call it Mr. Wise, and you can press a button, right, and the state updates, right, and it shows like advice on the screen. Every time I press this now, it shows a different advice, because make another call to the API and it updates the state. But I've had an issue where in the app I tried to update the future, right? I was using providers in this, and it wasn't working out too well. And I learned that when using futures are not as straightforward as when you're using with plain objects or plain data. Overall, Flutter, I'm starting to like it more, even though it was a shock, because I appreciate where you're coming from in terms of Android programming, and it's a future and it can save cost in the real world. Yeah, so that's it.
All right, thank you, Colin. Glenford, are you ready?
Yes, I am. You can just allow me to share.
Oh, yes. Yes, I. You can go ahead and share. Oh, I need to stop share.
Here. Okay, you're saying that, all right?
Yes.
All right. So when normally creating data tables in Flutter, you would have there's a data table widget that you'd have to go ahead creating data rows and data cells, and then assigning your values to each of the data cells. I because the app I was working on has a lot of data tables, and it kind of got tedious having to doing this over and over again. So I thought I could find a way to simplify the process, and with that I created a widget I call adaptive table that tries to minimize all the complexity. So instead of having to creating data rows and cells and data columns that you know it takes a lot more time, I use what I dot notation. So I have these classes that are quite complex with several layers of data, and using that notation, it allows them to easily access different values. So what this widget does, it takes a map of data. Let me see if I can. Okay, so this is my data class. It has all these different objects attached to it, and just translating all that into a map, I'm able to easily call each of the different properties. So with that, my journey creating data tables has been, a lot simpler. So so this is an example of it being used now. I could easily add another column. Let me see what's. Oops. Could easily add another field. So let me look back at. Oh, sorry. So item object has a name property. So let's try to access that. So if I come here and say, so let me see. This would be the title of the column. So item name. I say item name. Formatter allows me to transform the object to whatever format I want to. In this case, I don't necessarily need, I don't need to change it to a string because it's already a string. So I could use, let's remove that. And if I reload, then that property now gets updated in the data table. So that saved me a lot of time, not having to create data rows, data columns, and so on. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think this might be useful to others, so I might eventually create a proper library and publish it.
Okay, thanks. Curtis, you've used anything similar to this before? Data table?
I haven't on Flutter. I've done it on Angular and React, but not on Flutter.
Okay. Okay. So I definitely see this very useful and make it simplifies stuff. Which database backend are you using for this, if you don't mind?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is it's a local SQLite database.
Okay, I figure as much. All right. Thank you very much, Glenford. I always know if I put you on the spot, you will deliver. So good work.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has like a quick? Well, you can you don't have to show anything, but like any experience you have with Flutter, or just anything you want to say about what your experience like, and so forth with Flutter. And sorry about my background noise. Kids are home, so it's going to be noisy. Okay, so I guess with that, let me share up my screen. There's no more takers. So we reached to the end. So like I said before, thank you very much, Curtis, for speaking, and thank you for giving us that brief overview of data tables going forward, and thank you, Colin, for your feedback. Thank you everyone for attending. We're going to keep monthly events like a demo day where you can showcase application and anything that you feel proud of. And if you want to, gain some form of exposure based on these projects that you have done. For example, Oswald built a light bill tracker app. He used Flutter to build that, and something like that is very impactful and useful by a lot of people in Jamaica. So we want to showcase projects like this, whether it's Flutter project, whether it's a web project, or so forth. So if you're interested in speaking at any of the events, whether it's the demo day, Flutter, Docker, you can shoot me an email at events@jamaicandevelopers.com. And you can also look at our meetup.com Jamaican Developers Group, as well as go to our main website for all of the events that are upcoming. So once again, thank you for attending. The recording will be posted on YouTube as mentioned before. And with that said, take care everyone. Stay safe and COVID free. All right.